Hello. This is sort of could be related, I guess, to a previous video I made about the phenomenon of lad culture. This video is about the subject of ladette culture. Now, the term is probably much less familiar to my international viewers, so I'll just try and break this down a little bit. It may actually be more familiar to those who know the reality TV show Ladette Lady, which is not something I've really watched, although I am familiar with what it's about. Um, the term may be familiar to people in Australia. I don't know about Canada and the US, so probably is equivalent terms. Anyway, to break this down, a ladette, it's a relatively recent phenomenon. I'd say from about the 1980s onwards, especially, it became especially prominent in vernacular in the UK in the 1990s. Basically, it is a young woman, usually young, let's say between the ages of roughly 18 to 35, broadly speaking, who feels that she is being a strong character by behaving in an utterly obnoxious manner. So, a typical caricature of a ladette will be getting just outrageously drunk to the point where she has no self control, swearing like a sailor, getting into fights, getting into people's faces, especially men, and just being a thoroughly unpleasant person. Now, there is an interesting side effect to this, and that is kind of tolerance of it. And I think that tolerance comes about from, I hate to say it, but feminist logic. Because feminist logic pretty much states that because lad culture exists, well, we're going to turn a blind eye to ladette culture. And it's perfectly okay. Now, here's the catch. This is what I would say. Both are problematic. Lad culture has existed arguably for millennia, and everything I said in the last video, I absolutely stand by. So I believe I'm being consistent on this. I could understand, for instance, if people were to criticize my position if they said, well, you're being inconsistent because you're attacking ladette culture, but you don't care about the male equivalent. Well, that's why I'm actually, I feel it was practical to upload the lad culture video first, because now I'm talking about ladette culture. And to be quite honest, I hate it. I think it is totally, not that I would ever in a million years date a ladette. I don't know any self respecting man that would, but I just think it is very unfortunate that people think this is something that is not a problem. It's a huge problem. It's a problem for public health because these young women are constantly leaving themselves in hospital. But it's also a problem for it's a social breakdown, basically. And okay, I'm going to run the risk here of sounding like a social conservative, but so be it. You know, for me, the problem is that it isn't just about an obnoxious and attitude. It is about the fact that these women are completely misguided. They think this sort of behavior makes them strong and independent. It doesn't. It makes them look crude, ignorant, and obnoxious. Um, and it makes them look like thoroughly unpleasant people. And that may not be their whole character. They may have a positive side. But when you're behaving that way in public, whether you're male or female, although in this video I'm focusing on the ladette side, to any reasonable thinking person, that is utterly obnoxious. And it is utterly antisocial in the worst sense of the word. Now, people might say it's harmless. I thoroughly disagree with that. If you have, for example, a couple who are minding their own business and they have a gang of ladettes decide to confront them, and this is actually another aspect to it. One thing I hate is double standards when it comes to, well, pretty much anything to do with gender, but I hate the idea that because they're female, they should get away with it. So if a guy is in a position where some disgusting ladettes start bullying his girlfriend, I think reasonable people should defend him in sticking up for her. But I think there is double standards in the sense that people will say, "Oh, they're female, so let them away with it." It's bullshit. It is utterly, utterly misguided. I have had personal experience with ladettes, and I can tell you they are some of the most disgusting people I can think of. And yeah, I'm using strong language. I can't stand them. I remember I live in Tyne and Wear in the northeast of England. I remember one night coming back. It's quite late at night. Actually, it wasn't that late. It was more like sort of just after rush hour, I guess about 7, 8 o'clock. But there was a group of drunk girls got on, and there's this perception that young men, when they're drunk or when they're being in a group, they can be very unruly, and that's true. But no one should be under the illusion that a group of women who are in that state of mind are any better. If anything, they are worse. And the reason they're worse is because people can't really stand up to them. If a man stands up to them, then there's that whole concept of, oh, the girls, you can't do anything because you're a man, and it's rubbish. Um, I think we need to change that attitude. I take the view that if a woman wants to act like a man, then she's going to be treated like a man. And that means people should have the right to stand up to her. And if that's controversial, if you have a problem with the view, then I think you're part of the problem. Because it comes into this notion of social tolerance of this phenomenon. And it is, I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want to give the impression to my international viewers that all young British women are like this. I don't want to insult my compatriots in that way. Most young British women are thoroughly normal, decent people. So please don't think that I'm making a generalization. But all I am saying is there is a very obvious phenomenon in society where this is a problem, and it should not be encouraged at all. I mean, I take issue, or let's say I have a problem with this idea that people think they're being strong minded by being obnoxious. That's not strong. It's the actions of an insecure, loudmouth yob. Yob in British vernacular is a word for someone who engages in antisocial behaviour. But to be honest, I hate this culture, and I think it is absolutely um, sickening. And I do think feminism is partly to blame. I am not saying that feminists cause it. I'm not saying that for a second. But feminism does turn a blind eye to it and suggest that it is acceptable because men behave that way. But the problem is, or the issue is, the sort of men who do that are not male role models. They're not the sort of guys who are anything to shout about. Um, it's a general rule. People should respect others in society. It comes down to being a decent human being. And shouting out obscenities to total strangers, aggressively confronting total strangers, getting drunk and harassing strangers, or mouthing off to police officers, this is not intelligent. It's just all obnoxious behaviour, and it sickens me, to be quite honest. And it depresses me that we have this problem in society. Um, because what these young women are is bullies. Basically, they bully other women. They think that they can treat men like shit. They're basically horrible people. And if you call yourself a ladette and you don't like what I'm saying, just have a look in the mirror. Just have a look in the mirror, and for once, just contemplate your behavior. Okay, I'm not saying I'm perfect. That's not the issue here. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person and I've never made mistakes or anything like that. But I can guarantee I don't throw out obscenities at total strangers. I can guarantee I don't get into fights with strangers. So there is a certain standard of civil behaviour that all adults, all people, should conform to. That's why that culture should be completely shunned. It should be completely ridiculed and called out on. And young women who do it, I think they need to, I'm not that into reality TV, but I can't help but feel programs like Ladette Culture probably has some positive aspects. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that, I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not saying that young women should act like, what's her name, in My Fair Lady. I'm not saying they should be prim, proper Edwardian ladies. Not for a second. I'm talking about basic, decent humanity. That's all. You know, getting into fights with people, getting drunk where you have no self control, that is not strength. It's just not. And the same logic applies to men. But I've already spoken about that in the video about lad culture. Um, it's not about being white and white. It's not about, being prim and proper. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being a decent human being. Seems like common sense to me. Let me know your thoughts.